All right, good afternoon, everybody. All right, we're going to start again. We'll ask everybody to please take a seat. And I'm going to say one more time, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Super, thank you very much. I'm Wayne Justice, Chairman of the Canaveral Port Authority Board of Commissioners. It's a pleasure to have you all here today for this year's State of the Port address. First and foremost, please rise if able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, let me take a minute to introduce to you some of our VIPs here. First, Port Commissioner Tom Weinberg. Commissioner Jerry Allender. We've got a newly minted Commissioner Robin Hadaway. We've got our staff attorney, our commissioner attorney, Harold Beislein. Harold. Elected officials, I know that Councilman Wes Morrison's here, and I do believe I just saw Representative Thad Altman walk in. Thanks for joining us today, Representative. Appreciate it. Also, one special group real quick, the Propeller Club downstairs, we sponsor the a maritime program at the Rockledge High School. We've been doing this for years now. We actually have a senior class, and the senior class from the Maritime Academy, Rockledge High School, has joined us today. Please stand up, kids, young people. Thanks a lot. Okay, today's address comes on the heels of the port's 65th anniversary, which was marked last Sunday. But before I begin, I want to briefly remind us of how the port started. 1878, the Navy proposed to Congress that a deepwater port be created here at Canaveral. It wasn't until 1939 that the charter was approved by Congress to establish the Canaveral Port Authority. World War II showed the Navy a seaport on the east coast of Florida could provide a military with a strategic asset. In 1945, at the end of World War II, Congress approved construction funds. Funds were put into place, and on 6 June 1950, work began to cut an east to west path in the middle of the Indian River to the Atlantic Ocean. And on November 3rd, 1953, Port Canaveral was dedicated with the U.S. Navy destroyer on hand. The port has recently completed a new video. It's a look at where we came from, where the port is today, and where we are headed in the future, highlighting the wonderful things that make Port Canaveral what it is, the people, our partners, and this community. Let's take a look.
Shrimpers, scallopers, sword fishermen, king mackerel fishermen, snapper fishermen, whatever you could catch.
This year marks Port Canaveral's 65th anniversary. It is very impressive to see how far this port has come while we remain focused on our future.
The first involvement with my family with Port Canaveral was my father and grandfather went door to door in Titusville garnishing support for the referendum. They were river shrimpers and citrus growers, and my grandfather ran the fishing pier in Titusville.
Port Canaveral is unique in its diversification of businesses. We have everything from cargo to cruise to real estate to dining to parks, recreation, boat ramps. It's a diversity of business that really is the unique aspect here.
Hi, welcome to Port Canaveral.
Welcome to Port Canaveral.
Today, Port Canaveral is the second busiest cruise port in the world and delivers $2.2 billion of economic impact to Central Florida. Port Canaveral is not just a port, it's a destination that serves some of the largest and most sophisticated cruise vessels in the world. Port Canaveral's cargo business continues to grow and become more diversified. We handle more than 6 million tons of cargo each year. Here. The port is a great place to fish, swim, surf, camp, and even dine. 3 is the single largest project in the port's history, with an investment of more than $150 million that will serve the largest cruise vessels in the world. North Cargo Berth 8 is the newest multi-purpose berth at the port and will serve all types of cargo, including space initiatives.
Port Canaveral, 65 years of success, celebrating our past and looking ahead to the future.
Very professional, very nice.
Wow. I think I want to work there. What a great place. All right. At our Port Authority Commission meeting last Wednesday, we announced that the port had record-breaking numbers for fiscal year 18 with more than $103 million in total revenues. This success comes from hard work, strong partnerships with our stakeholders, tenants, and community members like you. Together with your help and support, we'll continue to contribute to all the overall business and environmental health of this community that we share. Okay, I'm going off script just for a minute. Hey, tomorrow, this is pretty exciting. Right out here, okay, the view isn't as great as it normally is, but tomorrow morning, the largest cruise ship in the world, brand new, just coming over from Europe, is tying up right here tomorrow. And it's their first visit to the United States. And they're going to be here from early in the morning till the afternoon. They've got a first time in the United States. They've got to be inspected by our fine Coast Guard. They've got to do some drills and all that important stuff. People all have to get off and then get back on. So they're going to be here all day. If you're in the area, come by and just look at probably the largest ship you're ever going to see. Pretty exciting. Okay, with that, it is my distinct honor to introduce to you Captain John Murray, Port Canaveral Authority's Port Director and CEO. John.
Thanks, Wayne.
Afternoon, everybody. I think we should have saved the video to the end, because now you're going to see a boring PowerPoint presentation. But, you know, it is what it is. So I'm going to lead off with my first exciting slide, Port Canaveral, celebrating 65 years. I wanted to start with this slide because it's been a very memorable year for the port. This past weekend, we celebrated our 65th anniversary on Sunday. On Saturday, we had a photo contest, and I don't know if any of you participated in that. We had 160 plus entries into this photo contest, and they were separated into 6 categories of winners, and some of the best photography, all amateurs that I think I've seen. And we held that contest Saturday night in the Exploration Tower, and it was quite exciting. But the other part is we're 65 years strong now. We're starting our 66th year. But we finished our 65th year with record numbers across the board in the port. And I'm going to jump into that slide right away because it's my favorite slide in the whole presentation. 18 versus 17, we had a total revenue of $103.8 million, up 6%. Our operating revenue, which is the key number in my world, doesn't include bank interest, doesn't include other types of things. It is purely revenue from operations, exceeded $100 million for the first time. We didn't budget for it to exceed $100 million, but it did. Up 9% from last year. Cruise revenue, also a new record, up 7% at $77.7 million. Cargo revenue, $10.2 million, first time in the history of this port that we've exceeded $10 million in cargo revenue, up 18% from last year. I'll come back to that in a minute. And our cargo tonnage was 6.4 million tons this year, also up 7%. So a great, exciting year in terms of our performance. I'll touch upon it a little bit later, but we're looking for an exciting 2019 as well. So to tell you a little bit about cruise, another milestone last year, 4.5 million multi-day cruise passengers came through the port. That's a 7.7% increase over 17. It was driven by three primary reasons. Number one, the Norwegian Sun, never called Port Canaveral until last April, came and initiated Cuban cruises, 3 and 4 day cruises, 3 days with Cuba connection, 4 days to the Bahamas. Very successful for Norwegian Cruise Line. They've taken the vessel to a prior commitment in Latin America. She'll be back again next April, so that's exciting. I'll touch on that again in a minute. Enchantment of the Seas is a slightly larger ship, replaced the Majesty of the Seas in June. And lastly, the Carnival Sunshine, who's been calling Port Canaveral for quite a while now, converted from a seasonal home port to a permanent annual home port. So having the ships year-round increased the passenger count, and we were up 327,000 passengers this year versus last year. So once again, another record. One of the exciting projects that we have, and I won't touch upon it enough in this presentation to convey how much work has actually gone into this project and how much continues to go into it. And while I brush upon some of the other projects that seem kind of small that we've done here, this is a huge project for us. 25-year agreement with Carnival Cruise Line. It includes Carnival investment in the cruise terminal itself. It's $150 million is what we expect it to cost, largest single project in the port's history, and it's required to accommodate Carnival's largest cruise ship, which is under construction. They're laying the steel on it this week. The vessel will be delivered in the spring of 2020, and it'll be home ported here in the fall of 2020. The ship is too big to fit at any terminal except this one. And one thing I would like to say is it's nice to show off this terminal. It soon will be our second newest terminal in the port. So the next one's going to be even nicer, I think, when we finish. A lot more automation, a lot more sophistication. This new ship will be the first LNG-powered cruise ship in North America. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a subsequent slide. On the cargo side, Central Florida's growth is driving our cargo business. We had 491 ship calls versus 400 the prior year, more than 6 million tons, as I've already stated, 10.2 million in revenue, and an 18% increase over the prior year. So all of our business sectors have been strong. I think this slide is great. It shows you what has been increasing in the port. Lumber was up 91%, Central Florida construction. Most of the lumber is coming from Europe, Scandinavia, and Germany. Newsprint up 68%. That's probably going to fall off because most of that newsprint's not for newspapers, it's to create the flyers that went out for the election cycle. So that's probably going to go down now. New autos, those are increasing, and we're looking at a bright future for more increases next year. You'll see that it's a very small item on the cargo tonnage report, and that's because cars don't weigh much. But if you look at the counts, we did 13,000 last year and 21,000 this year. So another success story. Aggregates are up 29%. I-4 corridor, I-4 ever as I call it. And then salt was up 20%. This is largely due to Morton now adding a table salt, sea salt, to their product line. So all of our businesses have been successful this year, and we're happy with their success. I'm going to touch some accomplishments that we've made through the year. This is by no means a complete list, but just to touch through what some of the things that we've been working on. We did finalize earlier in the year the 30-year vision for the future, our strategic master plan. We're already exercising a few items in that plan, and we can touch upon that a little bit later as well. Our West Turning Basin dredging was completed to minus 43 feet, federal authorized depth. The Titusville Logistics Center, we continue to bring in new tenants. We have RUAG, which is an aerospace company, has expanded their operation, doubled it basically, and we also have a new company, Ralph's Transfer, a regional distribution company, has leased 63,000 feet, and they'll be moving in the first quarter of this year. So good stories. We also did some things that as you drive around the port, you'll see that there's improvements in places, and if you can't put your finger on it right away, it's just because it looks better than it did. The Cove parking lot's been expanded. We added 337 spaces, storm drain system, irrigated the landscape, added lighting and security cameras. That was a project, as you may recall, that we had all dirt parking behind the Cove area, and this really cleaned it up, and it really just makes us look better. Cruise Terminal 1 parking construction. As you leave today, you'll see the parking lot being paved out here. They're paving it as we speak. That cruise terminal parking lot is because this garage will overflow when we bring a different ship into the port next year. We run this garage at capacity during spring break, winter breaks, that sort of type of cruises, and we will need additional capacity. So rather than build another garage, not have it full, we had a great solution with a flat lot, and that will be open by the end of the year. Also, South Cargo 3 pavement rehabilitation. Nobody sees this except Randy May. I hope he's happy with the job, but we went in there and took care of some port work that we hadn't done in a while, so I'm glad to say that we finally caught that up. North Cargo Piers 1 and 2 are our two most highly utilized berths in the port. They had significant deterioration just from a salt air environment and the types of cargoes that move across that dock. It needed rehabilitation and reconditioning, and we were able to accomplish that this year. We also began construction on North Cargo Berth 8, which will be a multi-purpose berth. That berth will handle all types of cargo, including space industry, and we look forward to that being completed the middle of next year. We also purchased a mobile harbor crane for $6.2 million. This will increase the port's flexibility and capabilities for heavy lift cargo, containers, any type of business we have, and it will lift the Falcon 9 booster. So we're hoping that we may be able to use it for that as well. It arrives in pieces in the first quarter of 2019 and will be assembled on the dock and operational by the second quarter. Other things we've done around our parks. Rodney Ketchum Park has had a refresh. If you're out there, all of the blacktop has been renewed. We also have more work to do there with a seawall, and that'll all be done next year, but it's looking a whole lot better. The restrooms were refreshed, so that is looking much better than it was. We completed the bait and tackle shop back in April of this past year, and that's running now and providing a great service, I hope, to anyone that's launching out at the boat ramps. And then lastly, we purchased the 9 acres from the county that was adjacent to Jetty Park. So Jetty Park is now one entire landmass of 45 acres under the control of Canaveral Port Authority. So, clapping? Did I hear clapping? Okay, all right. Good. Now, I just want to touch on this a little bit just because a lot of stuff happens here, and it happens, and nobody really knows how it happens. But we get a tremendous amount of support from our Central Florida elected officials, Brevard County, Central Florida, and it goes beyond that into the Florida Ports Caucus and the U.S. Congress. There's a lot of people that make this place happen and support us. And I'll touch base on my next slide on what some of that support is. So we have to be very, very engaged. We have some great folks on the ground working for us to keep us engaged at the state level and at the federal level. And also, along those lines, we've got our elected officials, we have our federal agencies and state agencies that we need to work with on a regular basis. And things don't happen without their support. So, you know, Florida Department of Transportation controls a lot of our lives because a lot of the grant funding and project work has to be approved by them. Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, I'll touch on that on my next slide. And then, of course, when you get into Washington, we've got the Department of Transportation and the related agencies, the Maritime Administration, Highway Administration, then you get to Homeland Security, which is Customs, Border Protection, Coast Guard. We need all these agencies to succeed. So it's very important that our outreach is beyond the local area to make sure that these folks are aware of what we do, how we do it, and can support us going forward. A few examples. When I first arrived here almost 3 years ago now, one of the first things I looked at was the 401 bridge and said, what happens if something hits the bridge or a hurricane washes it out? What do we do? And I got a lot of stares like, well, what do you mean? Well, if we lose the bridge, what happens to the north side? Well, you can't get to the Air Force Base. You can't move cargo off the north side. Our petroleum is stuck because you can't move the fuel trucks to the Air Force Base. So they said, you know, we got to do something about getting that replaced. So we start engaging FDOT and you know, there's no plan for the bridge. You know, we're going to redo 528. The bridge isn't part of it. So we engaged our local delegation, had some of the Central Florida delegation helping us along. I'll name Senator Buckel was instrumental, as Senator Mayfield and Representative Cortez from Central Florida, and they were driving the process to the point where they were going to introduce legislation in Tallahassee to make FDOT do a bridge study. And during that process and the negotiation and all that happens up in the sausage factory in Tallahassee, FDOT added it to their plan. So in fiscal year 2020, there's a PD&E study, preliminary design engineering study, to replace that bridge. That's the first step to getting it replaced. And it was the legislative effort of our partners that put the pressure in the right places to make it happen. That's one example. Another example is the sand bypass. And those of you who've been here for a while know that you know, when we had the great idea in the movie to dig a channel and build a port, that interrupted the natural flow of sand down the coast. And the sand generally flows from north to south. And as that opening was made, the sand started to pile up on the north side, and people's homes started to lose their yards on the south side. So there was a class action lawsuit back in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was settled, and essentially the settlement was the Army Corps of Engineers will move sand under the settlement approximately every 5 years from the north side of the jetty to the south side, and essentially pump it under the channel and replace the sand that gets eroded away on the south side. And they did that religiously for a few years. They haven't done it in 8 years. And every time there's a work plan that comes out, it wasn't in the work plan. Congressman Posey's been very helpful with us from the local side. We've had a lot of legislative support, also from Central Florida, also from the Florida Ports Delegation, to put some pressure on the Corps to make sure that's in their plan. And we had a meeting earlier in the year, and guess what? All of the Corps' projects are funded for Port Canaveral this year, for the sand bypass, the mid-reach, the beach renourishment, and the maintenance dredging. But you know, we have a great relationship with the Corps of Engineers, particularly the team in Jacksonville, and sometimes they need a little help, and that's what we're here to do, is help them move the ball. That also, the next item, the Canaveral maintenance dredging, falls into that as well. The next item is the Florida Job Growth Grant, and the governor announced it last year. It was a special grant that, because of Enterprise Florida, some of the changes in Tallahassee, there was a grant offering that was about $83 million. And if you could show job growth and infrastructure improvement, et cetera, then you could participate in this grant. And it was open to everything, every industry, from ports to airports to cities, municipalities, colleges. Everybody could go after this $83 million. $83 million is not a lot of money when you have the whole state competing for it. We put our bid package together, and we worked with our DEO colleagues up there in Tallahassee, who've always been very supportive of us, and we presented our package, and we were the first one to be named an award recipient. $8.3 million, 10% of the total grant is coming to this port. That money will be used to redo our north highway network for the cruise terminals, also new signs up 528 and A1A. So people coming to the port, there'll be new wayfinding, digital signs that will help people get here and get out. And we're excited that project is underway. We also, you know, government agencies are all a little bit different. Customs and Border Protection has issues right now that are tough. They're great partners of us here in the port, and I can't speak enough about the relationship we have with them. But at the national level, you get into the budget process. Where's the money? How are we going to get new agents? New agents are trained. They enter the workforce. Guess where they go? Southwest border. They're not coming to the ports. And one of the concerns we've had, and we started kicking this off as Port Canaveral and expanded to a broader statewide effort, is, you know, we're in Florida. We're tourism. We've got the 3 largest cruise ports in the world in the state of Florida. What happens if these passengers start getting upset because they're not getting off a ship fast enough because customs isn't clearing them, et cetera? So we worked to get language introduced. It's in the current Homeland Security bill that has been out of the committees of the House and the Senate and still has to go to the floor for full vote. But there is language in there that will mandate that CBP work with cruise partners and ports to make sure they have the manning and the capability to clear the passengers. So when we bring in a ship like the Symphony of the Seas tomorrow, we can get those people off the ship in a timely manner. So we're excited about that. We had a lot of help with that. The Florida delegation, the Florida caucus
was very supportive on that, and every other port in the state piled on, as well as the cruise lines themselves and the Cruise Line International Association as well. So a lot of support, and it got started here. So another success story. And this, I'll just give a little sideline here. You know, I've been here almost 3 years now, and the one most frustrating thing, I spent my whole life in the private sector, and the most frustrating thing that I have here is working at the speed of government. And you think, oh, let's do this. Okay, let's do that, all right? And then what's the next thing you have to do? You have to get it in a budget somewhere. And then it gets in the budget, but you don't get allocation for another year. I'm used to saying, let's do it, and it gets done. So it's been a challenge, but I'm hopefully working my way through it. So this just gives you a little highlight of partnerships for port projects. On the left, this is $43 million worth of projects that we have underway right now between our North Cargo Piers, or just finished, North Cargo Piers 1 and 2, Port Security, Harbor Crane, North Cargo Berth 8 construction, $18 million job, Northside Roadway and Wayfinding, that's another $13.4 million. On the right side, this is the money that we've been granted from the state of Florida and from the United States Treasury to work these projects. So it's been a tough one, and the one that's really driving this is that Florida Jobs Growth Grant, because that was 75% of the cost of the job. That was a great grant for us to have. And you can see that out of the 43 million, 21 million is coming from grants. Good. On the environmental side, Keeper of Our Beautiful is one of our partners, and we work with them on an annual basis. We have annual contracts for water quality sampling. A lot of folks don't know that, but every time the first meeting in October rolls around in the new fiscal year, we renew all of our contracts for another year to make sure that we keep this port clean. We also get recertified as a Green Marine. It's an environmental certification, voluntary program. It's an international program, but there are only 2 ports in Florida, one in South Florida and us, that are members of Green Marine. The other one I wanted to touch on is funded FIT's flushing study. It was a $20,000 expense, not a big expense, but as 528 is being rebuilt and expanded, and I believe the target's still out around 2025. One of the concepts, and we meet with FDOT on a regular basis, and they discuss it because it affects our business, obviously, with cruise and cargo traffic flows. One of the things that we brought up is, well, what about the causeways? We've got the issues with the lagoon. What about removing the causeways? Would that increase the flushing in the Banana River at all? And the answer was, well, we don't know. It's not in our work project plan, and we can't do that analysis. So we took it upon ourselves, along with Indian River Lagoon Council, to say, look, we have an environmental obligation to look at that. Before we just go drop another bridge on the causeways, let's look at it. It's $20,000. So we funded that study. It came back. It's available on our website if anybody wants to look at it. It's also on FIT's website. It's not a great improvement unless you replace the bridge down at 520 as well. So you have to do 520 and 528, at which point you get a 10% increase in the flushing of the river. No one knows what that means. 10% might be good, might be enough to stop an algae bloom. We don't know. But it's out there for everyone to see. We just thought it would be responsible for us to put that out there and get this study done. So we'll probably be hearing more on that later. On the horizon, say, okay, great year last year. What are you going to do next year? Well, just to give you an idea what's going on in the cruise industry, because we see the ships come and go, but it's a global thing now. And the impact of cruising on a global basis is a $126 billion industry. And the demand for cruises has grown 20% over the last 5 years. It's the Caribbean remains, although there's voyages all over the world, the Caribbean is number one, remains number one, and it is expected to stay as number one. Mediterranean follows behind that, European cruises, and the China market, which everybody thought was going to be great, started out fast and slowed down quickly. So it's going to evolve over a lot of time. So right now, all of the ships that are under construction are probably going to end up somehow in the Caribbean or in the Mediterranean, the 2 primary targets for delivery. There's more than 120 ships on order right now. So there's a lot out there. 30 of those will be powered by liquefied natural gas. These ships are mostly larger. There's a lot of exploration type ships out there now that'll do different places. They're smaller. They might be less than 1,000 passengers, but the main cruise lines that come here are all building bigger, newer, more sophisticated ships. And they're anticipating their passenger growth at 4.5% over the next 5 years will be enough to consume the capacity that they're putting on the market. So why is that important? Well, South Florida's got Miami, Port Everglades, and then Port Canaveral. If you're going to the Caribbean, you got to get there. And if you're running a 3 or 4 day cruise, we're at the outer limits at Port Canaveral. You go north of us, you can't make that turn unless you have a 5, 7 day, or 10 day voyage. So we're at the limits of the 3 and 4 day, and that's a good thing. South Florida's filling up. Miami is to a point now where they're trying to expand cruise terminals, and they have to take away cargo space from their tenants, and that's a big negotiation right now to build new cruise terminals to accommodate some of these ships that are coming at them. The good news for us is Port Everglades is at capacity already. We've got capacity. We've got terminals like this. We can handle the biggest ships in the world. We get Cruise Terminal 3, when that's built, we'll be able to handle the largest ships. It's exciting because there's more passengers, newer, larger ships, more tourism coming through Central Florida. We're joined at the hip with Orlando, and what's good for us is good for them, and it's good for the surrounding community. So next year, we've got some new things happening. Norwegian Epic will be back this month. This will be her last winter season here in Port Canaveral. This will be her third. After this, she'll be sailing off in the spring, not to be seen again for the near term. The Norwegian Sun returns next spring in April. I think I can say it. I'm probably not supposed to, but if I'm going to say it anyway in this quiet crowd, but she's coming back to stay. She'll be home ported here on a year-round basis. I don't think they've announced that to everyone yet, but it's exciting for us to have those in our schedule already. So next May, Harmony of the Seas is coming. The Oasis will be redeployed elsewhere. The Oasis was built in 2009. Harmony of the Seas was delivered in May of 2017. So that ship's only a year old. It'll be 2 years old when we get it here. That's essentially a brand new ship. She was the one delivered just before the Symphony. So we're excited. That'll be a significant upgrade in ship product here in the port. Along with that, the Enchantment of the Seas will be going away in June. It will be replaced by the Mariner of the Seas. Mariner of the Seas was home ported here back in the early 2000s and then went off and did all sorts of voyages in other places, but she's coming home and will be the new home ported ship here for the 3 and 4 day product with Royal Caribbean. That ship is significantly larger than the Enchantment of the Seas, which is why we're building the parking lot for overflow traffic in anticipation. Another exciting aspect next year, or ship change, is the Carnival Sunshine will be redeployed elsewhere, and the Carnival Elation will be coming to Port Canaveral. Now, the Carnival Elation's a smaller ship, so you say, why is that good? Well, the difference is the Sunshine today runs on an 8-day and a 6-day sailing, so there's 52 sailings a year. When the Elation comes in, it's going to go on a 554, which will be 77 sailings a year, or 78 sailings a year, which means there's more throughput of passengers. So there'll be more people moving in and out of the port, even though it's a smaller ship. And then the last exciting piece for next year is we've got the Norwegian Breakaway, which anybody's been here on a Tuesday during the port of call season. The Norwegian Breakaway is one of the largest, most beautiful ships that comes into this port. She's coming in to replace the Epic. So that's a very exciting upgrade with Norwegian Cruise Line next fall. If I took this slide to the next year, it'd get even more exciting. But I can't do that yet because they haven't started advertising those sailings. But I can tell you that 2020 is going to be even more exciting than 2019. And we've got a lot of projects going on in the port. I highlighted a few of them. These two are consuming a lot of our time right now. Cruise Terminal 8 and 10, Disney has not announced publicly, but they've announced privately. It's been in the media. I've announced it at board meetings. But they've got three new ships under construction. And when those ships are delivered, one of those or two of those or three of those or some combination of those and the 2 existing ships in Port Canaveral will boost us to a 3-ship Disney home port year-round. So we'll have 3 vessels here. They can't run the services they want to run out of Cruise Terminal 8, which has traditionally been the Disney terminal. So
We've been talking with them about Cruise Terminal 10. The ships they have are larger than the ships we have at Cruise Terminal 10 today, so we're going to need to make some modifications to adapt to their vessels when they come. So we're looking at that. I've got it's about a $48 million project. Nobody's signed up to pay for it yet. So, you know, like we've done with our cruise partners that are dedicated to Port Canaveral and want to be here, we work out an arrangement for the capital costs where they share in a component of the structure. So that is on board for Disney, so we're working through that right now. The big project I mentioned earlier, $150 million, is a Cruise Terminal 3, and we've already demolished the old Cruise Terminal 3, and that's creating some problems for us, and I will explain that in a subsequent slide. The project for the marine side, which is building the dock, the bulkhead, the interface between the land and the water, is going to run us about $40 million. The passenger boarding bridges that you see right out here, if you haven't seen one up close, you can look out the window after this session and see them for Cruise Terminal 1. Those have been ordered already. That's another $5 million expense. The parking garage is going to be a 1,700 plus vehicle garage. It's going to run us about $25 million. And the cruise terminal and roadways themselves are going to run us probably about $80 million. The bids are out on the terminal right now. We should have those back in just before Christmas for a vote by our board in January. The parking garage, I believe, is going to be in by the end of November and should be on our December 5th meeting. One key point of this is I mentioned in an earlier slide that Carnival was a participant in the terminal at Cruise Terminal 3. They have committed to $50 million in that terminal, up to the first 50. Then we have a share component for anything over 60. So we'll eat 10, they'll eat 50, and then we share. The terminal's going to run over 60. We know that. We know what this one cost. That terminal's got a little bit more sophistication. Anything that Carnival wants to do in that terminal, because they're going to have it for 25 years, and oh, by the way, there's 4 5-year extensions after that. So that agreement could go out 45 years. And they're doing a lot of Carnival-type modifications inside. So it's going to be a very, very unique terminal. And this is one of the longest term contracts that Carnival has ever done in a port. So that just shows their commitment to Port Canaveral. Coincidentally, in 2020, when this terminal is delivered, it will mark their 30th year of running cruises in Port Canaveral. So we're excited to have them as a partner. And there's a big cruise event in Puerto Rico this week, and Bobby G., who works for us at the port, made a statement to me yesterday that Christine Duffy, president of Cruise Line, jumped up and couldn't talk enough about the new terminal in Port Canaveral. And we're building this terminal, as I mentioned earlier, because the ship that's coming to us is 6,500 passengers. It's almost as big as the Symphony that's coming here tomorrow. And it'll be powered by LNG, and we've done everything we can to make this work for Carnival, and they're very appreciative, and it's great to have a long-term customer like them. On the horizon for cargo, our business next year, we forecasted it to remain stable. We don't know how it's going to grow, but we've budgeted it at stable to what it was this year. 6.3 million tons is in our budget. The mobile harbor crane will expand our capabilities to be able to sell new offerings with respect to heavy lift. We also have North Cargo Berth 8 is the last undeveloped bulkhead in the port. So if you look at one of our port maps, it's the last piece up there that hasn't been developed, and it's being developed right now. I put this caveat in the end that cargo growth is still dependent on continued regional demand. The aggregate and the lumber that we're bringing in is hugely driven by the Central Florida building right now. And as long as those projects are going and Central Florida is booming, I would expect that the volume of cargo will continue at the pace it's been on. This I just wanted to put up, just a quick slide just to give everybody an idea of what we're doing. You know, we've got the North Side Road improvements, partial grant funding on that, but that'll be completed next summer. That's going to make a big difference to our ground transportation providers. We've got some new roads and routings, and we've involved all of our ground transportation local providers who run the shuttles and buses and brought them into the room for planning stages so that we're not designing something that doesn't work for the end user. And they've been very, very helpful, and we've had a lot of cooperation, mutual cooperation to improve the road systems around here. North Cargo Berth 8 will be done middle of next year. That's the main platform in the dock. We still have the uplands area behind it, which will be a subsequent project that's not on this list. Cruise Terminal 3, that's a big one, and that's going to take a lot of our resources to get through that one, to have that terminal open by May of 2020. Cruise Terminal 8 and 10 renovations, I highlighted those as well. We're targeting those for 2021. And North Cargo Berth 4 on the other side, where you used to see a derelict tugboat over there, we got rid of that. It's now a fishing reef down off St. Lucie. But that berth needs to be revamped, and that's going to be an expensive project, so we're pushing that onto the future. One thing I didn't mention on Cruise Terminal 3 is, wow, $150 million, how are you guys going to pay for that? Obviously, we have to go into the, we're going to have to go into the equity markets, and the way we're looking at it is for $100 million of that money, 50 million of it's going to come from Carnival. We're looking at 50 million either with bonding, and we'll finance the whole deal, and then Carnival reimburse us, which is similar to this and Disney's arrangement. So it'll be a CapEx reimbursement. But for the 100 million, we're going to do a combination of bonds and bank loans. The other 50 million, we're going to fund out of our operating budget. So, you know, one of the things that we don't want to do is add more debt if we can pay for it with the revenues that we generate. So reinvesting in our success is what I like to say, because we're taking the money we earn and we're reinvesting it in projects like this terminal, that terminal, which will bring in bigger ships, bring in more income, and keep this port growing. So that's a target going forward. Other things that I mentioned, we have the highest demand for bulkhead in the port's history. And we've got bulkheads that we can't use, like berths 3 and 4, because of the channel width and the cost of those projects. And looking at berths 3 and 4, and combined, they're about $80 million to redo those docks. And we'd have to take the docks back, move the seawall back further, and that's a significant cost. So we have to take a hard look at it and say, are we better putting our money in that? What's the return? Versus upgrading a cruise terminal. Looking at Cruise Terminal 5, we've got some visions there on how we can, they can only take a 970-foot ship now. We look at ways that we can get larger ships in there and get more value out of our investment. So it's a matter of prioritizing our spend right now, and that's where 3 and 4 is in the future, because there's other short-term projects that we need to be funding right now. We've got a lot of diverse cargo in the port. That's going to continue. Larger cruise ships are coming. Some of the larger cruise ships won't fit at existing terminals. So there's a lot of moving things around to make sure that we can fit the new ships that are coming to us. We want to be prepared and able to accept them when other ports can't. Next summer, we'll have 9 port of call ships that will be berthing at North Cargo Berth 5 and extending into North Cargo Berth 6. Reason for that is we'll have 6 ships in port at the same time next year, and we don't have berth 3. Berth 3 is out of service with the construction. So we're 1 down, and we need to find another place. So there will be some disruption with our cargo tenants. We've met with everybody, so they understand a port of call for a cruise ship comes in, it's here for 10 to 12 hours, and then it's gone. So we're going to work with everybody to make sure that we make that as seamless as possible. But it's a necessity just because we don't have any place else, and we don't want to be turning the cruise lines away. So they're okay with that. We also have increasing requirements from the space industry. Our friends at SpaceX have met with them a couple of months ago, about 6 weeks ago maybe, and they're bringing 2 more vessels to the port. They're bringing this Mr. Steven. If anybody's looking to look at a funny-looking ship, look up Mr. Steven on Google, and it's got this big net that they're going to try and catch the fairings. That vessel's supposed to be here in early December, from what they tell us. They're also bringing the sister to the SpaceX drone ship here over to Port Canaveral as well. So we'll have 2 of those in the port so they can handle the Falcon Heavies offshore. Our challenge is, where do we put them? Because all these vessels have to go somewhere, and we just don't have extra bulkhead to park people. So that's one of our challenges. The other near-term priority is to facilitate safe operations for LNG-powered vessels. We in the port are not going to be producing LNG, handling LNG, but we are responsible to make sure that those players that are following the rules. We have involvement of the Coast Guard, American Bureau of Shipping, the cruise lines themselves. We just want to make sure that everybody does it safely and above board. And we've had several meetings. We just had one a few weeks ago that Shell sponsored, who's the supplier for Carnival. And they came in and had a full-day session. And we're going to continue to have those and broaden the population as we get closer to the date. First ship will be here in the 4th quarter of 2020. So we're excited about that. So in wrapping up, I just want to say that it's been great to be here this past year. We had a great year, and we're excited about the year before us. Just to reinforce the message that I try to reinforce every time I have an opportunity, that
that my role is to, or goal is to keep a measured and financially responsible development plan here in the port. That if we build it, it's got to have a return on our investment. And I also believe that strong organic growth through sound business planning will lead us ahead and keeping a handle on our business partners to make sure we've got what they need at the time they need it. We also need to add value and provide support to our port business partners. One thing I try to do is talk to everyone that's in this port, and if they've got problems, I'll listen to the problems. We'll talk it through. We might not always agree, but I think it's important to listen to our partners, because if your business is doing well, then we're doing well. So it's all fits together. And lastly, protect the foundations of our success and position the port to meet the demands of the future. So exciting time to be in Port Canaveral, and I can guarantee it's going to be more exciting in the next 2 years. So, thanks.